starting with news being distributed from horse to horse to horse to horse, from town to town to town to town, sharing news, trying to find what the news was.
Hello and welcome to the Reynolds Media Lab. I'm one of your hosts, Chloe Cross.
And I'm Vanessa Ribeiro.
And today we are going to be talking about our very own Reynolds School of Journalism, which is actually celebrating its 100-year anniversary of teaching journalism here at Nevada. Now, Vanessa, to get started, obviously we're going to have to go a little bit back in time.
Yeah, just a little bit. The first journalism class was taught in the fall of 1922. It was taught by our very own, drumroll please. You know what? It just says Mr. ... actually.
Now, it turns out the class was taught by Laura Ambler. She was a graduate of the University of Nevada, Columbia University, New York, and long connected with the Gazette. Here's a description of the class. Acting as a special correspondent for the city and state newspapers, students enrolled in the first course in journalism offered at the University of Nevada will furnish the public each week with the latest news of college activities.
In that first class taught by Ambler, there were about 11 students, and half of them were women.
And actually, Vanessa, it was students who led the push to bring journalism to Nevada 30 years earlier.
The student record began in 1893. They wanted to do it in public and out in the public eye, so they went to the regents and I guess to the administration at the university and asked for permission, and they were told no. So instead, they had a secret meeting up on the second floor of Mackey School of Mines and decided they were going to start it themselves as an independent.
The students had their own newspaper, but they were ready for more.
Now this lands us in 1923, and Alfred Higginbotham, a newspaper reporter from Ohio and son of a minister, arrives in Reno to teach journalism.
Now it's 2022, and journalism education has been taught at the university for 100 years. The first class was taught by Laura Ambler, and then Higgy arrived, and he dedicated his whole life to making sure that the journalism program could grow and thrive.
Higgy was a great promoter. Some people, students thought, who is this guy? He's overdoing it. Others really literally fell in love with him and were inspired by him.
From the time that he had arrived, Higgy tried to make journalism its own department, separate from English.
And in 1942, he succeeded, and the department would remain independent for 40 years.
And then, of course, he kept staying here. 1924 became 1934, became 1944, became 1954. And I walked onto the campus and I walked into a building. There was a woman sitting there. So I said, I'm thinking about going to college, but I don't know much about it. Can somebody help me? Walks me in and introduces me to a guy named A.L. Higginbotham, Professor Higginbotham, with a vest and a little key. He looked just like a real professor. There was no school of journalism, no dean. He was one of many chairmen.
Well, we had a little dinky building. I mean, hell, they even had a Spanish class in that building.
Prof collected every word that was ever printed about any graduate or anything, and it went on the bulletin board with a circle around it in red saying, our good friend. So we had a lot of good friends.
And it wasn't unusual for Higgy to call me into the office and either scold me out or put his arm around me. Well, it was a school that had a family feel to it. The professors from Conover to Higginbotham to others, really had a personal relationship with students.
Basically, the hardcore journalism classes were taught by key stage journalists. We had to write editorials, we had to study historical events here in Nevada and what the goods and the bads were. So they really put us through our paces, and I think we survived. One of the gals that was in that class was Myron Borders, who's had a distinguished role in Nevada journalism, probably one of the very, very finest reporters that ever came out of the School of Journalism here in the University of Nevada.
Higgy was an idealist more than a realist when it came to what goes on in the field of journalism, and it's probably very fortunate for his students he was an idealist. You learned the basics with him, but I think the thing you took away was his idealism. Whether it was realistic or not, it worked.
The students had various relationships or feelings about him.
Higgy terrified me.
He was very insistent upon having his school rank highly, and one of the ways you do that is more students that are working in the field over a period of years. He was very concerned that his female students wouldn't continue working in journalism after they got out and got married and had a family. So he was a little reluctant to have too many female students in his classes. I don't know if he gave us a tougher time or not, but we knew that if we got into it, we better stay with it or Higgie's ghost would haunt us.
There were two diametrically opposed personalities. There was Higginbotham, the chair, the department chair, and Jan, who was this outgoing, gregarious guy. He was such an urbane, suave, sophisticated man, and he had been a foreign correspondent, had traveled the entire world. And his stories about how he gathered and reported the news so captivated my imagination that it was there and then that I decided, I think I want to be a reporter.
University presidents would come and go. But Higgie, out of longevity and influence with where the power was, with the newspapers in the state, which means with the power, with the legislature, he cast a long shadow. That gave the journalism students in the journalism department a sense of self-identity. The little department had 3 Pulitzer Prize winners at that point. There are now 6. In the 60s, there were already 3. You'd be sort of in awe of what these journalists had gone out and done, like the great Frank McCullough, who was sort of the patron saint of all of the graduates of journalism, went out and was in Time Life and the LA Times, and one of the great American journalists, and he came out of here.
Dad became the Southeast Asia Bureau Chief for Time Inc. in 1963. Dad loved UNR, he loved the Reynolds School. He was very proud of being a graduate from that university and that program.
Eventually, that first era of journalism education in Nevada would come to an end. Kiste Janulis had passed away.
When I think of Jan and how worldly he was and how he had traveled, I often regret that I didn't have the opportunity after my very global experiences to sit down with him and discuss that.
And after 40 years at the helm, Higgie too would pass away.
With Higginbotham gone, the school would face an entirely new set of challenges.
Then you went through chairman. They were very able, they were very good, but they didn't have this stature that Higgie had on the university level. Why couldn't we take that little department and turn it into a school with a dean and maybe even a building?
There was interest in becoming a freestanding school.
But we thought this was quite a good idea. We were a little naive.
President at the time in the early 1970s believed that journalism was too small to warrant school status. And it wasn't until Joe Crowley became president of the university in the late 70s that the idea of a freestanding school of journalism really began to take hold.
He knew that journalism had a great place in society. He said, yes, we'll do it, let's do it.
While the department became a school in name in 1984, it still needed something more to really make a splash, to define what it meant to be a journalist at the University of Nevada, Reno.
It's a school of journalism now, but nothing had happened really. There was an old boy luncheon every year at Baron Hilton's ranch. Donald W. Reynolds, he owned more media in Nevada than anybody else did. And he went to that luncheon. So he said, Mr. Reynolds, some of us were thinking about creating this new school of journalism up in Reno at the University of Nevada. We were thinking maybe a good name for this would be the Donald W. Reynolds School of Journalism. And he looked and he says, that's a very good name.
The school began establishing a dream team of faculty.
We were extremely fortunate that Bourne Morris moved to Reno and the Don Reynolds began to support those Reynolds professorships. because that was just a profound moment for the school to have someone of Bourne's caliber begin to build our advertising program.
She had come from the professional world as a woman at a time when women didn't necessarily get to the top ranks of organizations, and she did. And so I could look at her and aspire to be her.
It was her. You know, if you could meet her standards, you could play with anybody.
I'll never forget the first time I got an email from her saying, "Good job, I'm so proud of you," and I think I still have that email.
There's the advertising department, and Bob Laxalt had just retired running the University of Nevada Press. He was an accomplished author, and he wrote that book, Sweet Promised Land, and he was part of that Laxalt family. And then we found former Washington, D.C. foreign correspondent, and we found John Fruch, who had been a Life magazine bureau chief.
They also needed a dean.
Travis grew up around Temple, Texas. The first years of his life, they did not have electric lights. They used kerosene lamps. He went to Harvard and took advantage of the education that was here. He had to work. He worked cleaning the dorms for some of the wealthier students there. 1963, when he was actually a radio reporter, that he was waiting for President Kennedy at the Trade Mart. Of course, we know what happened.
So I had to run a search committee to hire the first dean of journalism.
He was taking care of our 18-month-old son, John, and the phone rang. And it was Joe Crowley, and he had called, apparently, to offer Travis the job. And Travis said, "Well, I would really like to talk to you, but I will have to call you back because I'm giving John his bath."
Joe said that told him everything he needed to know about Travis, and how that was the reason why Travis was going to be a great dean, because he was not only a great journalist, but he was a humanist.
We intend for our graduates to have fine journalistic skills, but to be well enough educated as human beings that they can understand the world around them. The skills will get them the jobs, the education will keep them the jobs.
Technology was just starting to bubble up, right? But Travis Lynn was at the forefront of building websites and HTML coding and all that.
He understood the importance of computers when we were still working on those little Macs, you know, and he made sure we got computers into the journalism school.
With these pieces in place, the school was ready to make a big ask.
So we went to the Reynolds Foundation seeking $5 million to build the building, and the foundation said, "We'll give you half of that, and you raise the rest." Alumni and friends of the school really stepped up, but we were still short. We needed the legislature's help. The journalism building was not at the top of the priority list, so we called upon Jim Joyce.
Jim Joyce, a Nevada graduate in journalism, was the #1 lobbyist in the state of Nevada.
The timing was very fortuitous for us because the state Senate needed Jim Joyce's help with a campaign to raise the state's debt ceiling.
The state of Nevada is going to go bankrupt. We need to have, I think it was a constitutional question, to raise the bonded indebtedness, and the people of Nevada are not going to say yes. You've got to run a campaign to get the people of Nevada to say yes. You've got to save the state of Nevada, Jim.
So a deal was struck whereby Jim would help with the debt ceiling problem if the legislature would help kick in the money to get the building done, and that's what came to be.
And later, when Milt Glick was the president, I told Milt Glick that story, and he looked at me, he says, "I don't want you telling that story anywhere."
The Reynolds School experienced years of exciting success and growth. For a while, Travis Lynn stepped down to become faculty, which then led to Jimmy Gentry becoming the dean.
Jimmy placed an emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion.
Jimmy brought along, one of the great gifts to this school in the form of Paul Mitchell. Paul is one of those people that he changes lives, and he has this way of connecting with students which is unlike anything I've ever seen. Just, he can be kind of the crotchety old uncle when he needs to be.
He gave me a G on my first paper. And I was so confused because I was like, is this a G for great, Paul? I don't know what this is. I'm pretty much an A's and B's student. I don't know what this is. And he said, no, he said, I couldn't give you an F. It was that bad. So I gave you a G.
But he can also, be this voice that gets in the kid's head that stays there, that always tells them, you are deserving of what you're doing, and what you're doing matters.
Paul's class, that was kind of my first experience at the university. It was kind of like introduction to college as much as introduction to journalism. So just making that jump and living on my own and feeling like, okay, I'm coming into a family and people who care about me, and they're gonna teach me about more than just journalism. They're gonna teach me about life and becoming a man. I think that was very important.
The energy here has always been really positive, like supportive, encouraging. I think that the teachers were always very supportive of, our interests personally. I feel like I got to know them like on a personal level.
Jake, as I'm sure others will tell you, was quite a personality, was an irascible guy.
I definitely got Jake. If you look at my transcript, there is evidence of that.
Jake Heighton faked his death once for me in a lecture hall full of high school students, and then they had to cover the story.
I had a story that jumped, I think this is a record, it jumped within that issue of the Sagebrush 5 different times. And Jake held it up in front of the class and said, "This is not how you want to write. This is John just carrying on and carrying on and carrying on." Jake was making a larger point, and he was exactly right.
I can't talk about the Reynolds School without mentioning Donica, Donica Mensing. I was there, as a 19-year-old student in her class, and almost 20 years later, she's helped me kind of become the teacher that I am.
I think a substantial portion of my early 20s was spent in Donica Mensing's office.
Sometimes in difficult situations, Donica would express both her intelligence and wisdom and her kindness and compassion. Some people would say that those are not necessarily characteristics you might find in a university, but they were certainly characteristics of Donica.
Travis was the only professor at the time of that particular track. And so all of my, broadcasting, editing, all those classes were with him.
It was in 2003, and he wasn't feeling well. I called to see how he was, and he sounded terrible. And so I raced home and somehow got him into the car, got him to the emergency room.
I got a call from Sheila, and she said, I was at Channel 2, and she said, Wendy Travis is in the hospital and he's not doing too good.
They determined that he had a strep infection.
I was like, oh my gosh. So I called the hospital and got transferred to his room. And Sheila later told me that one of the last things he did was, she was in the room and she said, "Travis, Wendy is on the phone for you." And he turned his head toward the phone. And then he died later on that day.
It left a void and it profoundly affected the people who he nurtured in his time here at the school.
I think one of the best lines, I was talking one time about campus politics to him. And I was really super disappointed about a couple of people on the campus who I felt were being, mean toward me. And Travis said, you know what I do, John, when somebody disappoints me? And I'm like, no. What do you do? Hold a grudge? He said, no, I forgive them. And I always, that's something that's going to stay with me to the day I die.
We were a little at 6s and 7s, I think, for a while after Travis died.
What was remarkable was how everyone came together. Our advertising competition team that year won the national competition. It was a fabulous experience and one that really brought the school together.
In 2004, the school would appoint a new dean with big ideas named Cole Campbell.
Cole was a visionary. He created the grad program, the fast track grad program.
Cole was without question one of the brightest people I've ever met.
He would come into the room and he just had a way about him that just assured you that everything is okay and don't worry about it, you'll figure it out. And he gave us a song. I still remember that song. And he said, what was the song? If I'd a hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this town. It's a hammer of justice. It's a hammer of peace. So that was our charge. God, it's one of those things that just sticks with you.
He died on January 5th, 2007. He was tragically killed in a car accident.
If I'd a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this town.
We lost Dean Campbell to a car accident. We had an interim dean and the recession that hit at that time.
But as the entire country was encountering difficulties in navigating a tragic time, the Reynolds School got an unexpected surprise.
We were still running on analog technology, and we were trying to figure out a way that we could slowly move toward a digital platform, right? And so we had started talks with the Reynolds Foundation, and we're thinking about possibly asking them for $1 million to try and enhance that endowment so that we could slowly start building the technology towards a digital platform.
The folks from the foundation came and took a look around and said, it's going to take a lot more than that. And ultimately, they made a gift of almost $8 million.
If we hadn't been able to do that, we wouldn't have been able to continue to recruit the caliber of students that we have here today.
In 2011, the school once again found itself without a dean.
When Al came, I think we were all hanging by a thread.
Hi, I'm Al Stavitsky, Dean of the Reynolds School.
Al brought with him a vision and stability for the school that was so very much needed.
We've been recognized nationally for the innovation in our curriculum and for the diversity of our student body, faculty, and staff, and how multiculturalism is addressed in our curriculum. And I think that's going to be central going forward.
Diversity has to be practiced. People have to see until it's just second nature.
Typically for Native students coming from a reservation, like for myself, there's a lot of barriers to education and just barriers to success in general.
I grew up in Stockton, California, and my family is still there. My mom was a school teacher and my dad worked at a cannery.
We're a very traditional Latino family, so we're very close. And I'm the firstborn too, so it was a big deal for the first daughter to be asking to go away for college.
To have, professors there who represented, you, that was great.
The teachers here have always been very supportive in terms of whatever kind of stories I wanted to pursue in my classes, which allowed me to kind of grow and give me a little bit more confidence in pursuing them and being able to speak up about why these stories are important to me and why I should tell them.
I was part of Noticiero Mobile. That's the part of journalism that I actually really love, is when you can focus on communities of people that maybe aren't being represented as much in mainstream media.
When I first stepped foot at UNR, and especially the J School, I just saw that it was very clear to me that this is exactly where I wanted to be.
We needed somebody that could come in and take over and take charge and lead us to the next level.
My name is Rocio Hernandez. I am currently a reporter at the Nevada Independent.
My name is Sinevi Spoonhunter. I am an independent documentary filmmaker and reporter.
I'm the executive editor of the Reno Gazette Journal.
owner and founder of Flans Rights.
Visual editor at the Wall Street Journal.
Large corporation called Aristocrat Technologies with about a $26 billion market cap.
Well, it's tough to find anything more proud, something to be proud of, than to go work for three presidents of the United States.
I currently work for the University of Nevada, Reno as the manager of publications design.
Ended up moving to San Francisco for a summer and publishing for the first time in USA Today at 20 years old.
I work in the entertainment industry doing strategy and publicity.
I'm a journalist at the Washington Post.
I'm the owner of K. Sutherland PR.
I'm the editor and co-founder of the Colorado Sun.
I am the community relations manager for NV Energy.
I'm executive editor of news and initiatives at USA Today.
What started more than 100 years ago with that first group of students who started the newspaper despite opposition, and then a young woman teaching our very first class, then Prof. Higgy, who came, devoted 43 years to building the program. We see this love and devotion carried on through the many students and staff and faculty who have been here since. This is bigger than a single program at a single university.
I've been able to live a very good life because of journalism. If you want a job that's going to be very fulfilling, if you want a job that's going to make you happy, that's what journalism is to me. It's about enjoying your job and that job being important.
Journalism has always been a tough business. I am an optimist, and I believe that there will always be room for people who are passionate about this business and passionate about, holding the powerful accountable. Telling good stories, serving readers, serving our communities. And, those are some of the fundamental lessons that I learned in part at UNR and at the Reynolds School.
The relationships that you build and the mentorship that happens continues to be what makes this school, I think, so unique from other colleges on campus here. That's where the magic happens, I think. It's with the people, it's with the relationships, it's with the memories that you have.
I think it is so incredible to get this opportunity to look back while also getting to participate in our own slice of history.
That's right, Vanessa, and I will say that something that cannot be disputed is that the role we play here is important, and what we do really matters.
This has been Vanessa Rivero
and Chloe Cross
with the Reynolds Media Lab.